Welcome back to my channel. I'll be reacting a video about 65 years ago. A 1956 high school student debate developing nations and colonialism. The Philippines, Ghana, Mexico, and India. The 5 delegates here are Raul Contreras from the Philippines, Alfred Bannerman from Gold Coast, Ghana, Francisco Arellano Belloc Jr. from Mexico, and Chitranjan Kapur from India, and the last one, Geneviève Martineau from France. They discuss colonialism and developments in formerly dependent areas using economic aid. They name important development activities in their respective countries as mass education, village development programs, industrialization, and improved agriculture. Delegates also discussed the direct effect on recent important changes in their countries on their own life. These include independent and free election in India, World War II, and the post-war victory over the Huks in the Philippines, the breaking up of tribal system and the growing demand for independence in the Gold Coast, Ghana, and the expropriations of US oil holdings in Mexico. Grab all your snacks and keropok, sit down, relax, and enjoy the video. But before we start, please consider follow me at TikTok. Without further ado, let's start.
You've come in the midst of an argument about whether or not colonialism has been a constructive force in world history. It started out rather one-sided as the only colonial power represented. The other 4 countries here tonight are the Gold Coast and the Philippines, India, and Mexico. But let me introduce you now to the students who are here for the discussion. First of all, Alfred Bannerman from the Gold Coast. We call him Nini. He had a good
Ghana.
time down at Atlantic City High School when he became a member of the mighty Molecules, wasn't it?
Yes, the Chemical Society.
The chemical club in the high school. Next is
From India.
Chitranjan Kapur from India.
16
Pete,
years
as
old.
we call him, 16 years old. Had an especially good time up at St. Mark's, Kent School, because he feels at home in an atmosphere where the students call the masters sir. Francisco Arellano, whom we call Paco, comes from Mexico. He's 17, working real hard in the high schools here, but he works even harder at home because Paco is going to 2 high schools at once. A Mexican high school in the daytime in case he wants to go to a Mexican university, and in spare time an American high school in case he wants to go to MIT. Finally, Geneviève Martineau from France, and who did I forget? Raul, I'm sorry, Raul Contreras from the Philippines, 15
only
and a half.
15 years old.
Tonight, we're talking about colonial areas, former colonial areas, and their part in the world, areas that are now talked about as underdeveloped areas. Before we get back into the discussion, I think we ought to define just what you mean by underdeveloped. What do you mean by underdeveloped area?
I think underdeveloped area is one which was up till some time back under the domination of some foreign power, and that power did not develop the resources of that area because it wanted to profit itself, and it may have developed incidentally, because it in the process of its own economic development.
How much of the world is underdeveloped, would you say?
I think a large part of the world. About 75% of the world's population and about 50% of the world's area, inhabited area.
Well, 50% of the world population is considered to be literate, and another 50% of the world's inhabited area or
From
population is
Philippines.
said to be underdeveloped. And undernourished is what it means, enough food.
I think the UN figures are about half the world is both hungry.
Half the world.
Half the world.
I should think so, because Africa, for instance, has got a large part of underdeveloped area, and Southeast Asia, for instance, has got a large part of underdeveloped area. And likewise...
Does that surprise you, Geneviève?
Yes, it does, really, because in my country, we have some poor peoples, but we haven't got an idea of the half of the world could be so really so poor and doesn't have enough to eat or...
Well, not actually poor in my case. I mean, not developed technically. Because if you come to Africa, we are not poor in the Gold Coast, for instance. We've got a lot of food, and it is monkeys who eat bananas, which you really like in France. And so, actually, not that we are poor, but I mean, we are not developed technically, I should say.
No, but I think what she means is that 1/3 of every of the population of the world earns
Mexico, from
here
Mexico.
$50. Their national income, you know, their yearly income, it amounts up to $50 a year.
A third of the world's
A third of the
population.
world's population, yes.
They earn
And that's
less than
definitely
$50 a year, and 2/3, I think, earn less than $200 a year.
so it is very low.
It may be fascinating to some, but to us in India it's not, because we see it every day. And we know that it's quite true, because in India the average income of a rural worker is about, annual income is about $22 only.
$22
Yes.
a year.
$22 a year.
Yeah, only 22.
Tell me, are there any vestiges of colonialism left in those of your countries that formerly belonged to another
Yeah,
power?
in India there are quite a lot. For example, we have illiteracy, ignorance among the masses, and the British tried to increase the class also, the class disintegration.
Well, in my case, I think it is the educational, political pattern, which to me is very bad. I think that's the last trace of colonialism, which, exists in the Gold Coast now. Because I think the Gold Coast is living right through the last stage of colonialism now. I think we are now on the threshold of self-government. So there is no mistake in my saying that, we got colonial institutions in the Gold Coast now.
Okay.
Speaking about the Philippines, well, the most significant trace of colonialism that we have right now is the Catholic religion which Spain brought over.
These
And there's
Filipinos
so many traces
is
of it
well
too in the pattern of education
knowledge,
in most
very
of the
knowledgeable.
private schools.
School is not compulsory in your countries, is it?
Well,
smart
in the Gold Coast, it's
teenage.
not, but it is free in the primary stages.
The Indian Constitution says that every child should get at least primary education, if not more than that, in the next 10 years.
The same is true in my country, and what's more, the only thing that I really think that colonialism has left behind is the hatred for the gringo that, well, amounts to quite
Hatred for the gringo.
Yes.
Gringo.
You mean us by
Yes,
that, don't
yes.
you? Is there a lot of it in Mexico?
a lot. As a matter of fact, I don't think you could imagine how much you're not liked in Mexico.
Maybe you better tell us, Paco.
Well, there's quite an amount of reasons for this. Most of the, I believe that the principal reason for this is that most in every Latin American country, I'm not speaking it alone for Mexico or by Mexico, the foreign companies, that is English, French, and American companies, control practically everything. And you find that unless you have the raw materials, that is that the nation controls its own raw materials, cannot progress. And it cannot progress because in order to make investments go around, it has been forced to sell to the companies, to the foreign companies, legal concessions. And those legal concessions, even though they do give a small profit to the nation, it is not the same as it would be if they could hold everything. So you see, there is a reason there.
But Paco, is this dislike of the gringos, as you call us,
Yes.
as great now in Mexico as it was, say, at the time of the expropriation of the oil?
Well, not exactly. It was, see, you've heard a lot about the hospitality in Mexico, and all of it is true, but the thing is that most of the people who go to Mexico, tourists or whatnot, they go with the idea of trying to compare their standard of living, and you cannot do that with any country of the world, because it's well known for everybody that the United States has the highest standard of living.
I'm sure every one of the students would agree that you can't compare it. Cheat, I wanted to ask you a question. What about the idea of white supremacy? Is that dead in Asia?
What exactly do you mean, Ms.
When we were talking about vestiges of colonialism, we know that for a time in Asia, there was, whatever you want to call it, a myth or an idea or a supposition of white supremacy. Is that completely dead now?
At least in India, we don't have any color thing in it. We don't say that the white is better than the colored. All are equal.
Well, I think in Africa it is side by side. It is now dying, and at the same time we are giving birth to new white supremacy. If you come to the Gold Coast now, it is dying, and obviously I think before the end of this year, the whites are going to, get out the supremacy from the Gold Coast. But if you go to certain parts in Africa, it is now reviving. It's awakening from the death.
One more question to you, Chief. What about, you say there's no difference between Western and Eastern. What about the Anglo-Indians in India? The people who are half European and half Indian. Are they fully accepted members of society?
Yes, they're as fully as myself.
There are no disabilities whatsoever?
No, not at all. Our constitution gives them, I think, some special rights also. So, because they're in the minority group, so they have more rights than us even. They have more advantages also. They have some members specially nominated to parliament for their sake, though they are free to take part in all the elections.
Now you've gotten us on the verge of another subject that I'd like to go into next, which is what, we're talking about underdeveloped areas and how you're developing. What activity, what developmental activity in your country right now is your government most concerned with? I think we'd like to hear from each of the four of you on that.
Well, I think in my country, we've got three phases of development.
Agriculture.
The first one is agricultural development, the second one is educational, and the third one is political.
Well, as to my country, I do believe that the greatest campaign that the government is taking now into consideration is the education of the masses and not of the individuals. And to
Can you tell us in Mexico how quickly you have raised the literacy rate?
Well, I think that all of it has been based on patriotism, ma'am. About, I guess 10 years ago, there was a campaign. It was coming from the presidency of the nation, and it said that every Mexican should teach 5 Mexicans. And if we could accomplish that, within a number of 5 to 10 years, we could have most of the people to know how to read and write.
But
And it has,
I think in educating.
yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Whom did you teach?
Well, I think coming to that
Just a
point...
minute, let Raul.
Did you perform any sort of that education which you said the government
Well, I
recommended
myself,
or
I did,
something?
up to a certain extent.
Not your maid by any chance.
My maid, yes. I
Well,
Go ahead.
I think coming to that point, the Gold Coast is the leading country so far in the world in the campaign against mass illiteracy, because we are using the low-batch system to educate people who couldn't get the opportunity.
What is that, Nini?
Well, it is something like visual aids. We use signs. For instance, if we want to teach the letter S, we use the sign of snake, and we draw the snake just like the S. And so when the fellow sees the snake, the moment he sees the snake, he gets the letter in the head. And so he starts learning how to write S through seeing the snake. And we
How long does it take under this system to teach people to read
I
and
think
write?
just about 3
3
weeks.
weeks.
It takes
3
3
weeks.
weeks.
In Ghana.
And the whole alphabet in 3 weeks.
Yes. People are able to read and write in 3 weeks. And
Well,
after the end of the campaign, they
don't
get
you think-
certificates.
Don't you think that form of educating those illiterate ones is sort of primitive or...
No, the point is, it was invented by a French scientist. It's a new system. And most of the people who undertake this education are elderly people. You see people at the age of 80 or 100 coming to learn how to read and write
What do you do
before they
with
die.
No, but I really... Go ahead.
I think it's the best system you can get, but it operates best in Africa, especially in the Gold Coast, simply because we do
Because
get...
snakes.
Oh, no, not because of snakes.
Well, I mean, if you want to operate that most any sidewalk...
You've got tarantulas, haven't you, in Mexico?
Well, we get people coming from all parts of the world coming to see how we do operate on that system. We've got a lot of Americans visiting the Gold Coast, and the UNESCO is very much interested in that program.
Well, how about the Mexican system when you taught so many people to read so quickly?
Yes.
Did you use any simplified system like this?
Well, we couldn't have a letter that looked like a car in the street, though, but what we did was that the government gave out this special tablets, you could say, and they had all the letters, principal letters, and basic principles to anybody to explain to anybody. And it really worked, and I'm very much surprised to find out from Gold Coast right here that he thinks that Gold Coast is far way advanced than any other country.
Oh,
My way
well,
of thinking...
Not in this particular system. The UNESCO acknowledges the Gold Coast as being the leading country in the campaign against mass illiteracy. When
You
come to mass
Mexicans are pretty
education...
proud of your campaign against it.
Oh, no,
I
no.
think this is a wonderful subject on which you can compete with each other and see who's best. Paco, you were interrupted a moment ago when you were telling what part you had in this mass literacy campaign. Did you teach
Well-
5 people how to read and write?
Well, not quite 5 people, man, because I wasn't much of a teacher. I did it when I was 13,
Whoa.
and I taught my maid how to read and write.
And she got her certificate, did she?
Well, she got my certificate.
Now, we skipped 2 of you when we were talking about what developmental activity your government was stressing most. What about India, Chit?
At present, our government is concentrating on heavy industry because the government realizes the importance of the heavy industry. See, any nation who has to be free and advanced has to have its own machine-producing machines, and we should not be dependent on any other country for those machines. And until and unless we get them, get them and produce them in our country, we can't be advanced as other countries are. So, but that doesn't mean that we are not giving any attention to other things. Dam building and literacy works and all those, they are going on. But the most importance is being given to heavy industry at present.
How about the Philippines, Raul?
Ours, on the other hand, my government is stressing very much importance on the development of the agricultural industry
in the Philippines.
And most of the aid comes from the United States, I should say.
Tell us a little bit more about it, will you, Raul? What is the program?
Well, you see, the Philippines and America are involved in a democratic partnership, as they call it. It's sort of a system wherein they try to foster closer and a more harmonious relation between the peoples of the two countries. And it also includes the sending of U.S. equipment and commodities to the Philippines as approved and recommended by Philippine-American experts. But the Philippine government
These delegates
also plays a
from
part
the
in
Philippines,
They have to provide the money so
it's
that
really,
those
really smart.
commodities sent by America can be used.
How many Americans do you think you have in Philippines at present?
Very interesting.
Americans,
Yeah.
well, I don't know exactly, but I can tell you that the aim is to have a more diversified economy for the Philippines, greater production, and a higher income for the agricultural and industrial laborers.
I mean,
Well,
do you get most of those things free, or you get it, I mean, in forms of, I mean, loans and all those things?
Well, we get most of them free.
Oh,
well, I
free.
think I'm afraid of this point, because we don't believe in getting things free from any country.
No
There's a
doors.
selfish purpose in behind all of that.
Yes. There's a
Well, I
selfish
don't
purpose.
think so. There is a selfish purpose.
There must be.
Because the purpose of America is to strengthen Philippine economy, because it believes that the Philippines gets much of its strength from developed rural communities.
Oh, well,
And
I see.
in
It's
the-
how I take it to be. I've seen that America is very much interested in the Far East countries, simply because they fear, I mean, there might be some communist colonization
I'm
in
with
those
you.
countries, you know, especially the Philippines. I think it is of strategic importance to the United States.
Yeah.
Well, if you come to Africa, for instance, I mean, we lack most of these things, you know. We don't get American aid.
Well, I should say, Nini, I guess all of us are against certain communistic principles, if not all. And in strengthening the Philippines, don't you think that it also strengthens the free world in some way?
Well, it doesn't strengthen the free world. I mean, it helps towards, I mean, democratic colonization. As
it strengthens the
I should
American
call
way,
it.
I suppose.
See what
I
mean?
want to get Raul to give us some more information about how do you have any personal
Well,
background of experience with this
I
land?
have a personal experience in this kind of work. You see, in the Philippines, we have what we call the Federation of Free Workers.
Oh.
And the purpose of this is to, well, hire the, shall we say, the standards of the working conditions of laborers, especially the farmers. Now, with regards to farmers, we have a branch under that, the Federation
Very good
of Free
explanation
Farmers.
from the
And the
Philippines.
Federation of Free Farmers has another branch, the Junior Federation of Free Farmers, to which I belong.
He
That
only
started in a
15
Jesuit
years
school,
old,
ironically,
teenage
and I
boy.
belong to a
Ironical.
Benedictine school. Well, you see, this is how we
Wow.
do it. We form committees, and every weekend
Who
we go
is
to
this
the
guy?
remote barrios, about 100 or so miles from the city of Manila, the capital of the Philippines. And, well, we bring with ourselves some form of books, magazines, and rice and corn seeds, these flour bags, and we sell them to the people of those small communities, which, well, can't be reached so easily, at a very low price, you see. And most of the time, I mean all of the time, we have to endure so many hardships.
Who subsidizes the price?
Yes.
The Americans?
No, not the Americans. We have funds, you know. We get them from the students of the colleges.
Oh,
There are
well,
sorts
yes,
of,
yes, I
of
charity,
membership
I mean,
fees.
I mean, something like charity.
Something like that.
Oh, I
And
see.
well, with regards to the hardships that we encounter, it's most of those lands are below the mountains where there are operations going on between communist and government forces. So we have to, well, the fear of dying. So we have to receive Holy Communion almost every time we go there. And
Do you have many communists?
well, it's slowly fading away, you know, and it's not accessible to transportation. So we have to use these Carabao wheel carts, and we ride on them.
What are
And
they?
sometimes when the people don't expect us to be going there, usually, well, we have no food to eat, so we turn to unripe bananas and these hard bread that they make in the province.
What form of government do you have? Do you have, I mean, democracy? Or,
We have a democracy.
I mean, after the American pattern or after the British pattern?
American.
It's after the America.
I
Naturally.
see.
Oh, no wonder.
When did America become interested in Philippines?
It always
Well,
was.
America was, it started around the late 1800s, you know, when America took the Philippines away from Spain.
I see.
But, well, you know, the Filipinos are sort of hostile and so recalcitrant that they thought at first that America was selfish. But when America liberated the Philippines from Japan, they really found out that the spirit with which America did those things was a spirit of brotherhood, to help the fallen
Exactly.
brother rise up once more.
Oh, well, I mean, how many natural resources have we got? Because I fear, I mean, if America is
Yes.
interested in the Philippines, simply, I mean, America is interested because she wants to exploit your natural resources for her
We
own
have a
benefits.
lot of natural resources, you know.
Well, I see a very easy reason why any country should be interested in another country. Moreover, when this country is far east and when it has the resources, and when it's, as you said, has still communism within the island.
I still say that America has the motive of strengthening the Philippines in order to strengthen the free world.
Excuse me,
Well,
I want to get back to some of your personal experiences. We can learn so much from them as we understand what's going on in your countries today. You were talking about the inaccessibility of some of these villages that you
Yes,
go
it's
into.
small.
It was caribou carts. Cheat asked you a question, and then the answer got lost. Caribou carts that you go on to get there?
Yes, Mrs. Waller.
And what else?
Oh, well,
Do you ever have to
some-
walk or hike into them?
Well, not so much hiking, but sometimes we have to take away, you know, the tires of jeep wheels, and we'll let them run on the tracks, on the railroad tracks. Fortunately, they fit most of the time on the tracks.
What if they don't then? If they don't?
If they don't, well, we do some hiking.
I never knew that a Jeep wheel with the tire taken off would fit on a railroad
It
track.
can.
The rim.
You
What-
just
yes.
used the rim. Fascinating
Yeah,
means of
that's
transportation.
strange to me too.
Now look, all of you who are here have got exceptionally good educations or you wouldn't have been chosen, but I'd like to know what your schools are doing in your countries to prepare the kind of people that your countries are going to need. Obviously, with these new purposes, you're going to need a different kind of educated man.
Well, in the Gold Coast, I mean, it depends upon the educational system. We have stiff examinations as we go along. And so people who, I mean, we are able to divide the people into classes. People who are fit for technical education go to technical schools. People who can do the academic work go to the academic schools, I mean the ordinary high schools. And people who, I mean, can do the vocational work go to the trade schools. And so by doing so, we are able to get, I mean, the people for the engineering side and the people for the academic side.
How old do you have to be when you have to decide?
I think when you are in the third year of high school, and at that year you choose your own subjects. And by doing so, I think we are now going to produce a lot of engineers, I mean, people who can manage our technical operations or all those things, yes.
What about Mexico, Paco?
Well, ma'am, Mexico has been carrying it out, shall I say, a great campaign within the last 10 years because we have, as a matter of fact, the percentage of ignorant people is fairly small, I should say, to the rest of those ones who know, and it wasn't like that 10 years ago.
What are you, about 60% literate in Mexico
No, ma'am,
now?
I guess a little more.
More than
at
that?
least 75. At least 75.
About 10 or 20 years ago, it was less than 50,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am. It was
Much
something
lower.
like that. See, what happened was that the government has opened up technical schools and is giving all kinds of facilities and make better teachers, you know, better systems of teaching. And we've been getting places, as you say, with that system. I think this has worked, and it's the purpose of the Mexican education to teach the masses of the people. I'd like to know what the rest of the fellows here have to say in concerning the education because I'm very much interested.
See, in India, the British, the system that was under the British and that was put in, enforced by the British the main purpose of that system was to produce scribes and clerks and amanuenses who, most of them would not like to work with their hands. They did not understand the dignity of labor. So they always wanted these white-collar jobs and to sit in a desk and scribble away. They didn't want to use their hands. But when our national government came into being, they changed that system because we knew that unless we realized the dignity of labor, India could not go far. And so the government changed the system. And now we have in quite a number of places, quite a number of schools are after the basic system. The basic system is a system in which you are taught woodwork and metalwork and agriculture and all in the lower classes. You start down in the lower classes, so that by the time you get up, you don't have anything against the dignity of labor.
And you do have compulsory education for all
Oh
children in
yes,
India
our
now?
constitution says that every child should have at least primary education compulsorily. But
That's not true yet in the Gold Coast,
No,
is
we
it,
have
Nini?
free, but not compulsory.
Are
I mean,
the teachers-
the schools belong to the local councils, the various local councils. And I mean, everybody can go to the school, provided you get admission to the school. That's the problem.
Are your teachers British, or did they study in Great Britain? Or?
Oh yes, most of our teachers do study in Great Britain. I mean, we get a lot of, at this stage, we do like to send a lot of students to various parts of the world. I'm happy to say that, I mean, I suppose this morning, a lot of Gold Coast students arrived at Adelaide Airport. When I was coming, I came with 15 on the same plane, coming to study in the
15?
States, yes. And
What were they going to study here, Nini?
Well, they are coming to study in the various fields of study. Most of them like to go to the various, the best universities we can get so far in the world. I mean, for instance, we don't recognize almost all the American colleges. We recognize just a few of them because we like to produce the best. Yes, that's what we do. At present, we like to send, a lot of students overseas to study various things to come and replace the Englishmen as they
do
go.
they pay their own money or?
Yes, on the Gold Coast money. The Gold Coast is, comparatively a wealthy country, you see.
But it's a government scholarship, I think,
It's
too.
government
government
scholarship, yes. I mean, most of them are sent by the Cocoa Marketing Board.
The
Because
Cocoa Marketing Board.
Yes, the Gold Coast is the chief producer of cocoa in the world. We produce 50% of cocoa. In order to keep the price of cocoa constant in the Gold Coast, we set up this board, and the board buys cocoa at £3 a bag in the country, and we sell it to the United States at £15 a bag, thereby creating a large amount of profit, and we use this profit to balance the price in the country in case the price falls in the world market, so always the price is constant.
You're telling the United States now.
Oh yes, I'm telling them it's something, which is not secret. We like to get the money there. Without that, we can't carry on with the Volta River project, for instance, which is going to cost.
I want to ask you one more question. What is the most significant development in your country in your lifetimes? Because you've really been living history, people who are 17 and 18.
In India, the most important political development was that India got its independence from the British. That was in 1947.
Do you remember that? What do you remember about it?
Well, at that time I was just 8 years old, and as I remember, the day the independence was declared, I was up in a hill station. Hill station is a town in the hills now, and I was studying out there. So one day my uncle came, and that was Independence Day, and he told me that India had got independence. I was very happy. I didn't know why, but I was.
Well, in my case, I think it is a gradual, development towards self-government, because throughout my lifetime, I think about 4 years ago, the Gold Coast was wholly under the British, but we had to fight for our independence. And at present, we've got internal self-government, and we believe that before the end of this year, we are coming to join the United Nations organization, for instance.
What would you say, Paco, for Mexico?
Well, ma'am, for Mexico, I think this has carried, shall I say, the flag throughout Latin America. In the 1800s, we were the first country who got its independence in South America, that is in Latin America. We were the first country who had a university within the American continent. We were the first country in the 1850s who separated the church from the state. We were the first country in 1910 who had, who planned and had a well-planned division, shall I say, of the land of the big landowners against the people who had nothing. And in 1939, we gave a huge step forward to gain the basis of our economy, which is oil, and we took it away from the American company.
And that you remember well, I'm
Yes,
sure.
ma'am.
I'm sorry, our time's gone.
Oh, too bad.
It went so quickly. Thank you all, Nini and Paco and Geneviève and Chit and Raul, for taking part in tonight's discussion. We're grateful too to Scholastic Magazines for some of the background material on underdeveloped areas. Next week, the discussion subject will be, do America